Taxation isn't theft. How libertarians use victimhood to break their own rules. Taxation is theft. It's the libertarian mantra. A slogan. A shield. It sounds simple. Governments take your money without consent, and that violates property rights. But slogans aren't arguments. And this one collapses when you apply the very property theory that libertarians claim to defend, Lockean homesteading and voluntary transfer. If you actually play by those rules, taxation isn't theft. It's rent. It's ownership. And you're not a victim, you're a co-owner who inherited your share of a functioning society. 1. Property according to libertarians. Libertarians argue that legitimate property can only be acquired through original appropriation, mixing labor with unowned resources. Voluntary transfer, buying, inheriting, or receiving a gift from someone who owned it. That's their entire framework. No state fiat, no collective ownership. Just labor and consent. But even this oversimplifies reality. In practice, legitimacy exists on a spectrum. Not every claim is either fully valid or fully void. Competing claims, overlapping use, and historical transitions mean that property legitimacy must be judged by comparative claim strength, not moral absolutes. And collective ownership? That's not some exotic socialist aberration. It's simply a special case of private co-ownership. It operates under the same principles. If multiple people own something, they establish shared rules and appoint managers. Libertarians accept this in HOAs, trusts, and business partnerships. Rejecting it when the property is called a nation is pure inconsistency. Worse, they cannot deal with the fact that there is no more unowned land. Every inch of habitable land on Earth is already claimed, most of it by modern mixed capitalist democracies that maintain property systems, courts, and infrastructure. Libertarians cling to the fantasy that they could still homestead somewhere, but they can't. So instead, they use the slogan "taxation is theft" as a rhetorical shield to justify attempting to steal land through unilateral secession, and sometimes even violent revolution, rather than acquiring it through labor or transfer. In other words, to reject taxation, they end up rejecting the very foundations of property they claim to defend. 2. Modern democracies were homesteaded by revolution. Most democratic nations weren't built by inheritance or contract. They were built through revolution, conquest, and wars with other states, some just, some unjust. Some began with acts of aggression, others with defensive uprisings. But all involved the displacement of prior regimes. A revolution may constitute theft if the people it overthrew had a superior claim to the land. But even then, that doesn't mean the current possessors are thieves. Under Lockean theory, claims to restitution or reversal require living victims and living aggressors, or at least a documented line of inheritance. If no one alive today can prove a stronger claim, then the current possessors, those maintaining and organizing the land, hold legitimate title. And what came after wasn't chaos. It was reconstruction. People fought, bled, and organized. They established courts, roads, defense, and institutions. That's not theft. That's labor. That's homesteading on a national scale. And when a group builds and maintains territory through risk, labor, and exclusion, they acquire Lockean ownership of it. That ownership, by revolutionary effort, was legitimate. 3. Ownership was transferred to the people. Once homesteaded, the land and infrastructure were passed on through law, inheritance, and civic institutions to the public, to the citizens. In modern democracies, the citizens collectively own the country. They appoint a government to manage it on their behalf. The government isn't an invader. It's the elected agent of the property-owning citizenry. When it taxes, it does so to maintain shared property and services. That's not theft. That's what happens in every HOA and every shareholder-run corporation. Property owners vote, elect managers, and impose fees to maintain what they own together. 4. Newborns are legitimate co-owners. Libertarians often object. I never signed a contract. But ownership doesn't require a contract when you're born into it. Newborns receive a gift of co-ownership, just like an heir to a family estate. You don't need to sign to become a co-owner. You become one by birth into a collectively held asset. Every citizen is an owner of the national territory and its institutional structure. And yes, the system can impose dues and rules on co-owners, just like an HOA or corporate partnership. If a co-owner refuses to contribute their fair share, they violate the terms of the ownership itself. In libertarian terms, that's a breach of voluntary association and a violation of others' rights. The non-aggression principle doesn't protect you when you exploit shared resources while refusing to pay for them. In fact, refusing to pay taxes while benefiting from national infrastructure and protection is a form of free-riding aggression, exactly the kind libertarians claim to oppose. You can leave, you're not chained to the property. But even if you stay, the majority of other owners don't need your individual consent to maintain shared property. That's how every multi-party ownership works. Libertarian theory accepts this everywhere else, they just don't like when it applies to them. 5. Libertarian victimhood is justification for theft. Here's the irony. Libertarians and anarcho-capitalists posture as the ultimate defenders of property, but their claim that taxation is theft is really a victimhood narrative. It's a way to pretend the government has no rightful ownership and that they, the aggrieved party, are morally justified in seceding, refusing to pay, or even violently rebelling. But there's no more land left to homestead. All territory is already claimed, maintained, and organized. They're not victims of theft, they're frustrated non-majority owners who want to opt out of their obligations while still demanding the benefits. In doing so, they violate the very Lockean and contractual principles they claim to cherish. Conclusion: taxation is not theft. It is the rightful collection of dues by property owners through their agent, the government, for the use and maintenance of shared land and systems. If you don't like it, you can leave.